This is the story of how the simple flash of a red light on a digital keypad permanently shattered a queen's illusion of absolute territorial dominance. In less than 24 hours, the grand iron gates of an exclusive Crown Estate property transformed from the promised fortress of Camilla's bloodline into the physical staging ground of her absolute isolation. What looked like a routine property maintenance update was actually a bloodless, calculated execution of institutional warfare. What Camilla just realized standing in the suffocating silence of her private study as she received the frantic call from her son's moving team is that the crown on her head grants her zero property rights against the unyielding architectural governance of the royal bloodline. In this video, we are going to unpack the secret, desperate real estate power grab Camilla attempted under the cover of the king's ongoing health vulnerabilities. We will examine how she tried to weaponize the Royal Housing Registry to grant a permanent state-sanctioned 99-year lease to her non-royal children, effectively slicing off a priceless piece of the sovereign's estate for her private family. We will break down the exact forensic metadata trail that Prince William and Princess Anne uncovered within the property management committees of the Crown Estate. By the end of this analysis, you will understand the silent, ruthless retaliation that left Camilla staring at a deactivated security clearance, trapped by the terrifying realization that she actually owns absolutely nothing. To comprehend why this institutional trap snapped shut so brutally, one must first dismantle the towering illusion of absolute supremacy Camilla had spent 3 decades meticulously constructing for 30 years. Her entire trajectory was defined by a highly sophisticated public relations campaign designed to outlast public outrage, sanitize her history, and systematically erase the enduring physical and historical legacy of Princess Diana. She operated under the firm, unwavering belief that because she held complete psychological dominance over King Charles, she held the master keys to the entire constitutional and physical apparatus of the monarchy. Her inner circle and elite network of media strategists and aristocratic allies had grown to believe they were entirely untouchable, assuming the transition of the reign granted them a blank check to reshape the royal map in their own image. That sense of invincibility manifested in increasingly bold territorial choices that palace watchers noticed with deep discomfort. Over the past few years, Camilla had gradually begun treating the historic palaces not as sacred trusts of the nation, but as her personal portfolio. Her non-royal children were increasingly woven into the peripheral fabric of the estates, granted access and residential privileges that traditionally belonged only to the direct bloodline. Camilla believed she had rewritten the rules of territorial engagement, convincing herself that her 30-year survival game had achieved absolute permanent physical victory. She felt completely secure in her elevated position, misinterpreting the king's personal affection for unyielding property jurisdiction, completely failing to notice the silent seismic shift in land ownership happening right beneath her feet. But arrogance in the corridors of power inevitably leads to catastrophic carelessness. The trigger for the current collapse occurred as the palace began finalizing the highly classified long-term residential restructuring required by the transition of the reign. Recognizing the inherent fragility of her position and the stark reality of the king's health crisis, Camilla was gripped by a sophisticated form of commercial and territorial desperation. She understood that her current residential supremacy, her access to the sprawling historic estates, and the heavily guarded private manors is tied entirely to the lifetime of her husband. She knows that once the crown transitions to Prince William, her leverage drops to absolute zero, leaving her entirely at the mercy of the new king's grace and favor. Driven by this panic, Camilla attempted a breathtaking secret administrative maneuver designed to secure a permanent, heavily fortified aristocratic standing for her bloodline before the window of opportunity slammed shut. Behind closed doors, she quietly directed a senior household ally to submit a revised, highly confidential memorandum to the Crown Estate Commissioners and the Royal Property Management Boards. The paperwork contained an extraordinary request. Camilla was attempting to quietly finalize a legally binding 99-year lease on a highly valuable, heavily secluded multi-million-pound residence nestled deep within the perimeter of the sovereign's private parklands. The intended tenant for this priceless slice of royal heritage was her son, Tom Parker Bowles. This was not a simple request for temporary family housing. It was a calculated attempt to use the sovereign's influence to grant her family a permanent state-funded physical fortress, independent property rights, and constitutional legitimacy that would easily outlast the current reign. She was attempting to embed her private shadow court into the permanent physical geography of the British state, ensuring her family would possess a taxpayer-subsidised safe haven long into the future. Camilla fundamentally believed that if the king gave his informal blessing, her future was entirely untouchable, assuming that a consort's ambition could override the ancient, unyielding architecture of royal land inheritance. What Camilla fundamentally failed to anticipate was that the administrative machinery she sought to manipulate was already being forensically monitored by the ultimate landlords of the crown. While she was busy executing her strategy through the housing officers, Prince William and Princess Anne were quietly protecting the perimeter. When William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall and assumed his role as the Prince of Wales, he did not just inherit vast tracts of agricultural land and commercial real estate, he assumed overarching supreme authority over the sovereign footprint and the strict governance of royal residences. William, a man who has carried the silent, enduring grief of his mother's public humiliation, and who possesses an unwavering instinct to protect the physical future of the crown, for his wife Catherine saw the paper trail for exactly what it was. It was a hostile takeover of the monarchy's most precious asset, its land. Catherine has offered nothing but uncomplaining sacrifice to the crown, turning the homes she occupies into flawless centers of duty and family stability, never once demanding unauthorized real estate for her own parents or siblings. William has watched the contrasting behaviors and he has remembered everything. When the unauthorized lease agreement was routed through the property division, it immediately triggered a highly classified administrative alert that landed directly on the desks of the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal. Together, William and Anne conducted a silent forensic audit of the housing submission logs. They uncovered the extensive metadata trail of Camilla's private office, attempting to bypass standard independent property valuation and pressure the commissioners under the guise of the king's direct residential wishes. They saw the precise, calculated attempt to permanently siphon off a piece of the sovereign estate and the aggressive strategy to elevate the Parker Bowles narrative through physical proximity to the throne. The moral outrage within the bloodline was absolute, but in the upper echelons of the House of Windsor, you do not react with emotional screaming matches, eviction notices taped to doors, or leaked tabloid stories. You react with weaponized restraint. The retaliation was executed with chilling. Bureaucratic precision turning the very rules of property management into a clinical guillotine. William did not confront his stepmother in the drawing rooms of Buckingham Palace, nor did he spark a public scandal that would distress his father. Instead, he activated his absolute authority over the royal estate's operational and security frameworks. A new internal directive was quietly issued to the master of the household and the estate security command. The execution of their revenge culminated on the precise morning Camilla's son had scheduled his discreet, highly organized move into the contested property. A fleet of premium moving trucks carrying the private possessions of the Parker Bowles family approached the heavily guarded perimeter of the royal parkland. They fully expected the massive iron gates to swing open, granting them permanent entry into the sovereign's inner sanctum. But as the lead vehicle stopped at the security checkpoint, the trap snapped shut with breathtaking speed. The digital codes that previously granted Camilla's extended family unrestricted access to the residential wings had been cleanly and permanently wiped from the mainframe. The security personnel, acting under the strict, newly updated directives from the Office of the Prince of Wales, politely informed the moving team that the lease had been administratively voided. There was no screaming, no flashing police lights, and no dramatic scene. There was only the cold, unyielding reality of a locked gate and a deactivated access fob. The moving trucks were ordered to turn around, immediately permanently banished from the sovereign soil. Simultaneously, a digital notification pinged on the secure terminal in Camilla's private study, confirming that the 99-year lease had been cleanly struck through with a single administrative denial from the highest level of the estate. Camilla sat alone in her office, staring at the physical proof of her absolute territorial containment. Her grand real estate empire had been dismantled before a single piece of furniture could cross the threshold. As the panic of total institutional isolation set in, she looked toward the encrypted telephone to demand the king intervene, entirely unaware that the silence waiting for her would change the reading of absolutely everything. The heavy encrypted telephone receiver felt like ice against her ear as the secure line connected from the isolated quiet of her private study to the king's office. In the echoing, suffocating silence of the palace, Camilla presented her grievances with the breathless, practiced urgency of a woman whose entire territorial fortress was suddenly in freefall. She laid out the humiliating border rejection at the estate gates, the deactivated access codes, the moving trucks forced back onto the public highway, and the devastating administrative blockade orchestrated by the Prince of Wales. She demanded an immediate sovereign intervention. She fully expected King Charles to summon the Crown Estate Commissioners, overrule his heir, and reinstate the 99-year lease she had so carefully mapped out for her non-royal bloodline. For 3 decades, this exact dynamic had been her ultimate safety net. Charles had fractured his relationship with the British public, fundamentally altered the trajectory of the monarchy, and absorbed immense global criticism, all to ensure she would one day wield the absolute executive power of a queen. But that is where the narrative shifts completely, not because of a grand, dramatic argument across the secure line, but because of a devastating, unyielding silence. King Charles did not summon his aides to issue a royal countermand. He did not order the estate security commanders to unlock the gates and allow the moving trucks inside. Instead, he met his wife's frantic demands with a heavy, agonizing exhaustion that carried the absolute weight of the monarchy's physical and constitutional future. The king's silence was not a sign of a husband's indifference. It was the profound, calculated concession of a reigning monarch who had just been forced to face the harsh reality of his own shifting reign and his own vulnerabilities. Charles understands what Camilla refuses to accept. The survival of the House of Windsor no longer depends on the ambitions of the present, but on the unshakable, legally binding territorial stability of the future, a future entirely managed by Prince William. By refusing to intervene, the king quietly validated the administrative guillotine that William and Princess Anne had dropped. He signaled to the entire palace apparatus and to the property management boards monitoring the estates that the true governing authority over the sovereign's physical footprint had already transitioned to the Prince of Wales. Intervening to protect Camilla's private real estate network now would mean declaring a public institutional war against his own heir, risking a catastrophic scandal over the exploitation of crown lands. In that agonizingly quiet conversation, Charles chose the monarchy over her. He chose the survival of the bloodline, and in doing so, he left Camilla sitting in her office, facing the terrifying realization that her ultimate shield had just dissolved. This devastating silence exposes the raw, fragile underbelly of what can only be described as Camilla's profound commercial and territorial desperation to the outside world. She walks the halls of ancient castles and hosts receptions in the grandest rooms in the kingdom, creating the glittering illusion of absolute impenetrable ownership. But the cold economic and constitutional reality of the British monarchy is that she actually owns nothing. She holds no independent royal wealth, and she possesses no inherent authority over the Crown Estate or the Duchy lands. A 99-year lease on a sovereign property is not merely a housing arrangement. It is the ultimate state-funded luxury and administrative blank check that guarantees permanent, untouchable, elite status, high-level taxpayer-funded security perimeters, and massive generational wealth transfer. Camilla knew that the moment King Charles is no longer on the throne, her institutional currency drops to absolute zero. She becomes entirely dependent on the housing grace and favor of King William V. Her push to embed her son into the permanent geographical fabric of the state was born out of a suffocating awareness that her time at the top is strictly finite, and that without a legally binding lease, her family could be evicted from the royal orbit with a single letter. William's decision to execute a forensic audit and permanently void that lease was a masterclass in institutional containment. He weaponized the property laws of the state to lay bare her financial vulnerability, revealing that without the explicit approval of the Prince of Wales, her personal empire is completely insolvent and geographically exposed. He proved that the sovereign's land cannot be carved up and distributed as party favors to a shadow court. The deeper meaning behind this silent execution of revenge became highly visible in the weeks that followed. The intercepted moving trucks were not just a logistical failure for Camilla's team, they were the ultimate visual representation of an institutional quarantine. The subtle details of this shifting power are now visible to anyone who understands the silent language of the British monarchy. The digital locks across the perimeter of the contested property were physically replaced, ensuring that the old access codes could never be reactivated. Palace courtiers and estate managers who possess an exquisite radar for where the true power lies immediately recognized the shift. The message was sent through 1,000 minor administrative updates that, aligning with Camilla's private territorial ambitions, is now a fast track to institutional exile. This is where the story shifts from the cold execution of containment to the undeniable restoration of the true order. As Camilla's borrowed physical power evaporated, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, retained her rightful place with an effortless, quiet dominance. The contrast between the two women could not have been more stark, and the institution knows exactly who holds the true power over the royal households. Catherine has never needed to submit unauthorized memorandums to the Crown, estate commissioners to secure her extended family's physical legacy. Her parents and siblings navigate the world with quiet dignity, never demanding taxpayer-subsidized fortresses or 99-year leases to project authority. Catherine herself commands the highest level of residential respect, not through manipulation, but because her power is rooted in uncomplaining sacrifice, flawless execution of duty, and the unshakable legitimacy of being the mother of the future king. When Catherine crosses the threshold of a royal estate, she does so as the very future of the state itself. Her influence is authentic, earned through years of silent endurance and absolute loyalty to the Crown, by ensuring that the territorial integrity of the monarchy remains untainted by Camilla's private overreach. William was doing more than protecting the government's property portfolio. He was offering a silent, devastating defense of his mother's legacy, proving that the true physical sanctuaries of the institution belong exclusively to the rightful heirs. For years, William has watched the quiet, systematic attempts to elevate Camilla's family to the exact same visual and residential status as the bloodline royals. By fiercely guarding the sovereign's borders and invalidating the lease, William guaranteed that the prestige of the Crown will be preserved. He ensured that Catherine and her children will never have to share their highly sensitive private perimeters with a manufactured state-funded shadow court. It was not an act of petty vindictiveness. It was the ultimate silent restoration of order, executed through the undeniable permanence of institutional property protocol. The boundaries have been firmly re-established, sending a clear signal to the world that the ancient organism of the British monarchy cannot be permanently hollowed out by clever public relations, nor can its most valuable lands be hijacked through emotional manipulation. The Crown protects its assets, its history, and its bloodline at all costs. Camilla believed that by outlasting her critics and securing the title of Queen, she had achieved absolute permanent victory. She thought she had conquered the institution and secured the master keys to its ultimate fortresses. But she failed to recognize that true royal authority cannot be taken by storm or secured through administrative tricks. It requires the deep foundational legitimacy of sovereign duty. As she sat in the quiet luxury of her office, looking at the denied access screen that contained her dismantled future, the grand illusion vanished completely. She may still reside in the palaces for now, but everyone inside the estate walls, and soon everyone in the world knows the truth. The trap has snapped shut. The borders of the estate have been permanently redrawn. The reign of the territorial shadow court has been entirely dismantled, leaving behind only the cold reality of a consort who is merely a temporary guest in a house she sought to rule, and the undeniable truth that the era of Prince William has already begun. Thank you for exploring this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics and territorial battles of the British monarchy. If you found this forensic analysis compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below with your thoughts on Prince William and Princess Anne's decisive administrative retaliation. Your engagement helps us continue to uncover the unspoken truths behind the palace walls.